Stress can be experienced as nutritional, emotional, mental, psychological, and spiritual stress. All these stressors will involuntarily elevate cortisol production. Stimulants like pre-workouts, caffeine, and etc. can exhaust the adrenals by stimulating them to produce huge amounts of cortisol, epinephrine, norepinephrine, which is adrenaline. This leads to fatigue, lethargy, brain sluggishness, and a slowing down of the metabolism. This process can be years in the making, so logically taking time to improve it. Cortisol serves two functions: energy production and anti-inflammation. It will signal glucose metabolism by burning fat and protein for fuel, even releasing proteins from muscle and fatty acids, which are stored in adipose tissue. Glucose is the nervous system's main source of fuel. So in a training environment, this is positive. We have energy for lifting, running, whatever it is. However, we need this elevation of function to shut down and be regulated, or else there will be a metabolic hole. If cortisol is constantly elevated due to daily pressure, it will cause unwanted effects. Cortisol helps produce glucose from proteins, which causes an increase in blood sugar. If this extra glucose is not needed, like in normal daily activities, then it will be stored as fat. Extended periods of time with elevated blood sugar erodes the insides of blood vessels and leads to hypertension. This leads to heart problems. Oversecretion of cortisol has been proven to increase abdominal fat. Remember, cortisol breaks down muscle tissue, so if it's just flowing around the bloodstream and not being used for anything, it's going to eat away at precious muscle mass, and we all know how hard muscle is to grow. Lean muscle tissue is much more metabolically active than adipose tissue. The more muscle tissue we have, the higher your metabolic rate, and the higher this rate will be at rest and during exercise. Literally, more muscle equals more calorie burn. Increasing cortisol levels also cause food cravings for high fat, high sugar, high carbohydrate foods. These foods may act as a temporary mood booster, but they add to the amount of glucose flowing around the bloodstream, not being used for anything. So therefore, we would get more storage of fat, especially belly fat. So too much glucose in the bloodstream also sends signals to the endocrine system to release more cortisol and insulin to encourage the cells to absorb glucose for energy production. However, if you have developed insulin resistance or don't have the muscle mass for insulin to act on, it will be left flowing around the bloodstream or stored as fat. Can you now see the beginnings of a vicious cycle occurring? Because the cells are not being required to produce energy for danger or perceived threat or physical activity, you're just inactively being stressed, becoming insulin resistant, not being able to absorb the glucose insulin is encouraging them to absorb. Even if we begin exercising to counterbalance this, what type of exercise and the stimulus you put the body under will either encourage more stress, catabolic breakdown hormones, or more anabolic repair growth hormones. This is why what type of exercise we do is also very important, and how often we exercise and how we do it. But that is a whole other discussion and another deep conversation we could get into another time. Different types of modalities of training will either elevate stress hormones or elevate muscle building hormones.